Well, hey guys, I'm Nick and welcome back to Sci-Finatics. Well, what a treat! Paramount Plus has dropped the 7th episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2 early. I was so surprised. I was expecting to have to wait until Thursday to watch this episode. And because, I guess, of the San Diego Comic-Con on this weekend and this particular Those Old Scientists episode airing at Comic-Con, I guess they kind of decided, let's just drop it for everybody to watch. So what a treat having access to this episode early. So I'm going to do my review of this episode earlier than I anticipated, but that's all good. And what an episode it was. I think they managed to really bridge the gap between the comedy of Lower Decks and this, slightly more serious tone of Strange New Worlds really well in this episode. It was great to see, Tawny Newsome and Jack Quaid reprising their roles as Boimler and Mariner in live-action form in this episode. Had some really cool moments, plenty of references and everything which we're going to go through. It was a really fun ride, I thought. So let's get into this week's review of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Episode 7, the Lower Decks crossover episode, entitled Those Old Scientists. So the episode starts in animated form as if it was a Lower Decks episode. We get the Lower Deckers looking to do some repairs on this ancient portal, which apparently was originally discovered by Orions, according to Tendi, and that not all Orions, back in the olden days were all pirates. There were some scientists there as well, apparently. In fact, Tendi's great-grandmother served on board an Orion science vessel, which will come into play in this episode. We get the Lower Deckers going down onto the planet and doing some maintenance and kind of goofing off a little bit as the Lower Deckers, tend to do. Boimler's doing a Spock impersonation and everything. And then before we know it, Boimler is swept through the portal as it activates. And on the other side of it is Latta and Number One and Spock, and he comes through the portal in live action form. And as Number One, attests on the communicator to Pike, we have a slow problem here. We have a problem, and you can tell from these first moments that you're in for a bit of a fun time in this episode. We get the opening title sequence for Strange New Worlds, but it's been completely redone in animated form to kind of match Lower Decks. It's almost shot for shot the same as the Strange New Worlds opening title sequence. However, there's been just some little adjustments here and there, like the little space creature that attaches itself to the nacelle of the Cerritos in the Lower Decks opening. We see that in the opening for this, with the little space creature trying to kind of latch onto the Enterprise's nacelle. And also at the end of the opening title sequence, we see the infamous koala, the koala that you only see when you die or something. That's part of a completely different reality, or like it's the afterlife koala that you see that bridges all space and time, or something that they've introduced in Lower Decks a couple of times before. So it was I laughed out loud when I saw the koala at the end of the opening title sequence in this episode. Now Boimler's obviously lost consciousness and he's in sickbay, but meanwhile Una and Pike have been analysing his communicator, and they say, it's not just a Delta badge, it's actually a communicator built into the Delta as well, and and Pike kind of poo-poos this concept, saying, hey, who would want that? Like, flipping open your communicator is kind of the best part of having a communicator. So that was kind of a little cool moment as well. Boimler gets to meet everybody in sickbay, and he seems particularly starstruck by Una. He's a bit awkward hanging around her. She's a little bit nervous as to why he would be acting nervously around her, which we get to find out in the end of the episode. But it was a cool introduction for Boimler, meeting all of our Strange New Worlds cast and everything in this sickbay scene. Boimler's doing his best not to drop any information that he shouldn't in his little sort of briefing with Latta, as he's kind of taken around the ship and, makes a few flubs here and there, like like, he swears on Worf's honour. Oh, damn, I shouldn't have said that, So little references like this were kind of nice, creeping in there. We see Boimler, mounting Pike's saddle in the ready room. I love the bit when Boimler swings his leg over the saddle and says, Riker, just as he swings it over to reflect the somewhat unconventional way that Will Riker used to sling his leg over the back of a chair to sit down. I wonder if this was an improvised moment on set, considering Jonathan Frakes was director. They did an exceptional job in this episode of, working exactly the right tone out in terms of somewhere between the absurdity and the complete humour of Lower Decks and the slightly more restrained tone of Strange New Worlds. It's just finding that really nice balance between the two, so that there's humour, but it doesn't go ridiculously over the top like that Lower Decks can do from time to time, but still keeping things kind of pretty grounded, I thought. So I think Jonathan Frakes did a great job in directing this episode and just keeping that balance between the two shows just about perfect. Back on the planet, they're analysing the portal and everything, and Boimler's having a bit of a geek out about the tricorder that Mbenga's using, going over all his little collectibles and so forth that he's sort of, it's one of those, I can't, and they never almost exploded, and Mbenga kind of seems worried there for a minute. Meanwhile, we've got obviously the relationship that has sprung up between Spock and Chapel, kind of affecting Spock's, mental state a little bit to make him a bit more human, I guess, in this episode. So we're getting Spock laughing and smiling, and Boimler's completely crapping himself because he thinks he's done something really bad to affect the timeline, and Spock should not be behaving this way, and he reckons he's messed things up completely by his presence being there in this part of the timeline. But obviously, as he finds out later on, don't worry, Boimler, it's not you. It's just this thing that's going on at the moment between Spock and Chapel, and it's not anything critical you've done to affect the timeline. An Orion ship arrives, and it appears that Boimler's not going to be going home anytime soon, as the Orions steal the portal off the planet and go to warp. Meanwhile, Boimler's hanging out in the bar lounge with Ortegas and Chapel, and they're kind of having a bit of fun with him. They kind of recognise he's a little bit of an easy mark, and they're sort of trying to tease him a little bit. We get our first of the two Boimler screams in this episode, in this particular moment too. I think he's in this bar and he has a little bit of a mini Boimler scream in this moment or whatever with Ortegas and Chapel, which is fun. And they're talking about Pike's upcoming birthday. Nobody seems to know that it was Pike's birthday. He likes to keep his birthday all on the hush-hush, doesn't like anybody to celebrate it with him or anything. But Boimler accidentally sort of spills the beans that it's in fact a public holiday. Back in his time, the Pike's birthday holiday or whatever. So he kind of let that one out of the bag. And it seems like Ortegas is potentially planning a surprise party for him. Boimler offers to help them track the Orions because they don't have the technology to do so, but he obviously knows a trick that can detect Orion ships, but he doesn't want to give his hand up or let the rest of the crew know exactly how to do this, because this is, might affect the timeline if he does that, so everyone has to kind of turn their backs while he gets underneath the console and pulls a whole bunch of wires out and reroutes a whole bunch of stuff, manages to get the ship to where the Orions happen to be. And he's sort of trying to convince Pike that not all Orions are pirates. Some of them are scientists, and, not to be discriminatory just because that's where most of them have their particular career path. Some, but not all, are in fact scientists as well. Pike swaps some grain and everything they had in the hold of the ship for the portal, and it looks like Boimler's about to get home. I think, this episode's wrapping up pretty soon. We've still got half an episode to go. So they get to the planet, and obviously just when Boimler's about to go back through the portal and saying his goodbyes, Mariner comes through the portal, and she's come trying to rescue him, and she's just used up the charge in the portal that was meant to be sending Boimler back. And now she's stuck in the 23rd century. I was starting to think by this point in the episode, geez, we've had a lot of airtime with just Boimler. When's Mariner coming into this? I was a little bit surprised that it took kind of half the episode until we got Mariner in there as well. And this is where the real fun starts. The banter back and forth between Boimler and Mariner on board Pike's Enterprise it was priceless. Little moments like, Mariner being completely surprised and taken aback at just how hot young Spock was. And being worried that Boimler had ended up in a 21st century dystopian riot, which is a reference to that DS9 episode, Past Tense Part 1 and 2. These little quips and jibes that they sort of make about their predicament. Classic Lower Deck stuff, and it played really, really well. They're commenting on, Spock smiling and talking to Una about her being a pin-up poster or whatever, which she wasn't too impressed about. I think Una initially thought she was like a sort of a centerfold style pin-up or whatever for Boimler. But that wasn't the case at all. We obviously find out later on that she was a recruitment poster for Starfleet or whatever. But she was worried that she was a different kind of pin-up. We get a nice scene between Mariner and Uhura in their quarters there, just talking about Uhura's history and everything, and what sort of person she is, and Mariner kind of being her sort of bad influence self says, "Come on, let's take a break. Let's go to the bar and have some cocktails," as Mariner tends to do. She's a bad influence, that Mariner. Uhura just wanted to get her work done. Meanwhile, Uhura is still trying to decode elements of the portal to work out what they need to send them back to the future. Uhura's going over things on the pad. She's looking up sort of Cardassians and Bajorans and so forth, which I didn't think that there was contact with the Cardassians and the Bajorans back in the TOS kind of era. I thought first contact with the Bajorans and the Cardassians came somewhere in between TOS and Next Generation sort of thing. I wasn't sure that the first contact was kind of that soon, but I might be wrong. I know the planet that they were on was Setlik 2, and I know there was obviously a Setlik 3 incident with O'Brien in some war capacity or whatever. There was some huge skirmish between the Cardassians on Setlik 3, I think it was, with O'Brien being involved in some big event there. Wherever this portal is, it's sort of in the vicinity of Bajoran or Cardassian space. But it turns out that the inscription on the portal that she needed to decipher was actually written in Nausicaan. Meanwhile, we get Spock and Boimler doing their thing in the science lab. They're trying to synthesize some of this rare mineral that they need to power the portal, where none exists anymore. They have to try to synthesize some, and the synthesis doesn't go particularly well. It explodes. We get a Boimler scream. We knew there had to be one big Boimler scream in this episode, so that didn't disappoint that we got that in there. And not only did we get a Boimler scream in this episode, we also got this this very bizarre shot of Boimler walking away with this very kind of, I guess sort of like power walkie kind of, power walkie style walking technique or whatever, where he sort of just, does this kind of, walk that he did down the hallway or whatever, which is kind of how his character is animated in the show. He kind of did that in real life, which I thought was quite funny. We get a fun chat in engineering between Boimler and Pelia, speaking about leadership, how some of the best leaders in the past have kind of, been maybe a bit unsure of themselves initially, and they've just sort of faked it until they make it, I guess was Pelia's lesson here. Mariner and Boimler kind of rendezvous in a shuttlecraft to try to work out things. There's some interesting references there to Q. And Marta says, just shut up, don't summon Q, for God's sake, that's the last thing we need. And then she kind of goes on to reference, but there was no Q back in. These guys were more concerned about Trelane or whatever, which was another entity in TOS that had very Q-like mischievous kind of powers and everything. So there's been some speculation over the years as to whether Trelane was in fact a Q. It was never confirmed nor denied, but obviously very similar kind of characters. And I also love the little comment that I think Boimler makes, that everybody in this timeline speaks so slowly and quietly compared with them. They obviously speak very loudly and quickly, and these guys speak slowly and quietly, which I guess is that difference between the the Lower Decks sort of style humour and the Strange New Worlds style. Laan captures these two and sends them off to Pike's quarters, where Pike kind of gives them a bit of a talking to, saying, you guys are causing too much trouble. I'm going to have to confine you to quarters or something, because we just can't let you run around doing whatever you want on the ship. They're getting up to too much mischief. Pike's a bit cranky that Boimler's been trying to encourage a surprise birthday party for him, and Pike obviously, tells a story about his father and how they didn't get along particularly well, and, his father passed away when he was young, and he's obviously just about to turn the age that he's older than his father was when he died, and it's sort of playing on Pike's, mind a little bit, and he wishes that he had some time with his father, even though he didn't get along with his father too well. Boimler just reminds him, hey, your crew want to spend time with you, and there's an implication there that obviously, Boimler and Mara know about the accident that's going to happen to Pike. Pike knows about the accident that's going to happen to him. And Boimler's just saying, hey, just let these people, share some happiness and share some joy with you while you still can. So, I think that, makes Pike think a little differently about how he should celebrate his birthday. We get a name drop of the NX-01 in terms of this particular mineral that they needed to fuel the portal. And Boimler suddenly remembers that that this particular mineral that they need was part of what was on the hull of the NX-01. And that whenever they build a new starship, they put a little piece of the previous starship into the new one as a bit of a homage kind of thing. So they basically work out they need to find out where this mineral is on the Enterprise so they can use that to power the portal, which I thought they might have been going off to some ship museum somewhere like the one that Geordi had in Picard Season 3, and suddenly we were going to go and see the NX-01 again. That would have been a surprise. But no, they just extracted the mineral that they needed from under the deck plating of the Enterprise they were currently on. And while they were extracting this Hyronium or whatever the mineral that they needed for the portal, it was fun to see all of our Strange New Worlds cast kind of talking about the NX-01, and Ortigas was geeking out about Mayweather, the helmsman on Archer's Enterprise, and Uhura was geeking out about Hoshi Sato being a linguist and everything, and it's like, hang on, you guys are talking about the NX-01 crew just like Boimler and Mara are talking about you guys. There was a nice little parallel there, I thought, in this episode with that comparison. Una finds out that the pin-up poster that Boimler had in his quarters of her wasn't some centerfold kind of number or anything. It was a Starfleet recruitment poster using the ad astra per aspera quote that Una makes in her legal speech to remain part of Starfleet we saw back in episode 2. That was really good that Una gets to learn that despite all that she's been through to remain in Starfleet, ultimately she is going to end up on a recruitment poster for Starfleet using that same slogan that she used to help get herself off or whatever in that trial that she went through earlier this season. So I thought that was a really nice reflection of the trial scene, and also for her to learn that, hey, Starfleet aren't going to always have discrimination, but against augments and everything, and ultimately you're going to be the poster girl for Starfleet. So that was a nice little piece of information, I think, for Una to learn. Boimler and Mariner are back off to head home through the portal. Spock gives his live long and prosper salute, and Boimler is taken aback and all stumbly and can't get his words straight, doesn't quite know how to respond to this and messes his lines up or whatever. Lower Deckers heading back through the portal, back into animated world again, where we get to acknowledge the fact that, oh yes, Tendi, you were right, not all Orions are pirates. Some of them were in fact scientists. I love the fact that when the Lower Deckers got back to the Cerritos, we see Ransom there in the quarters, seeing the recruitment poster of number one there, saying, oh, she's pretty hot, like she's the hottest babe in Starfleet or whatever he said, which made me laugh out loud because, of course, Jerry O'Connell, who plays Ransom, is the real-life husband of Rebecca Romaine, who plays number one in Strange New Worlds. So he basically saying, yeah, my wife's hot. so I thought that was a funny little reference. I think a lot of us were kind of wondering whether there was going to be some sort of connection there between Jerry O'Connell and Rebecca Romaine's characters in this episode. So I love it that they put this little extra gag in there. That was great. And the episode ends back on the Enterprise, but this time it's in Lower Decks animation style, and we get the crew there. They're drinking Orion cocktails for real, and I think they're all a little bit affected by this cocktail because they're all seeing themselves in animated form. Spock's got jelly arms, and Ortegas can't believe how big her eyes are. It's it was a nice way to finish the episode with our Enterprise crew members basically all being created in Lower Decks animation form. That was a really nice way to finish the episode. All in all, I really think this episode was fantastic. I laughed all the way through it. It was a great blending of Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds. I think Jonathan Frakes managed to capture the perfect tone between the two shows to bridge that gap really, really well, with some really cool laugh out loud moments and some really good in jokes and references and everything. I think this was a great episode. I thoroughly had an absolute joyous ride watching this show this week. But let me know what you guys think. Leave your thoughts in the comment section. Let me know what you thought of Those Old Scientists, episode 7 of season 2, Star Trek: Strange New Worlds. Guys, if you haven't subscribed to Sci-Finatics yet, please don't be shy to do so. Click on that big subscribe button to stay up to date with all the latest Star Trek news on YouTube. And also be sure to check out all my merch in the merch store, where you can pick up, cool Star Trek, t-shirts like this one, plenty of cool t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, caps, stickers, you name it, all there. There's always a sale going on too, so check out that, and it gives yourself a bargain and helps support the channel at the same time. There's so much going on in the world of Star Trek, with the Comic-Con releasing a whole bunch of new trailers and everything, so I'll be back very soon with my next video looking at some of those. I'll catch you guys soon.